Who's that? Oh, wait a minute. Look at the face.
I'm a step today, which everybody should do. So I'm a little slow. I'm just coming out of the grogginess.
All right, Kyle, you may begin whenever you'd like.
Perfect. All right. So welcome everybody to the September 22nd, 2021 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Thide and I'm the chair of CB6. The meeting is being called to order at 6:36 p.m. And tonight we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. And I also just want to thank everybody for accommodating the schedule changes for this month. As we know, there are many holidays that we wanted to make sure that we were respecting and allowing our members to celebrate. So I want to thank everyone for adjusting their schedules from our regularly held meeting. So tonight's minutes will be taken by CB6 Secretary Seema Shah.
Oh, I'm not taking the minutes. I think Matt Bondi will.
All right. Tonight's minutes will be taken by CB6 Assistant Secretary Matt Bondi. And we will now take attendance by roll call. Answer present when your name is called, please.
All right. Matt Bondi asked me to take attendance, so give me 1 second.
Sige.
All right. Kyle Thayed.
Present.
Thank you. Elvie Barroso.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Bondi. I don't think he's joined us yet. Claire Brennan. Claire Brennan.
I see her online.
A picture is there.
Yeah.
Oh, did you just say Claire? Sorry, I'm here.
Thank you. B. Disman.
Present.
Thank you. Rick Eggers, I believe he's delayed.
Yes, this is Reshma Patel, stepping in for him until he can join. I'm the vice chair of the committee.
Wonderful. Thank you. Molly Hollister, I believe she's delayed. John Keller is unable to join us today. Kavitha Matthew is delayed, I think. Sandy McKee.
Present.
Thank you. Rich Mintz.
Present.
Thank you. Kevin O'Keefe.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Jean Santoro.
Here.
Thank you. Seema Shah.
Present.
Thank you. Sandro Sherrod. Sandro Sherrod. Mark Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Thank you. All right, and we do have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Jesus. So the agenda for tonight's meeting will appear on the screen before you. If there is no objection to this agenda, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So members of the executive committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I've got a few too many things open.
Okay, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the June 16th meeting were distributed to executive committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the June 16th meeting are adopted. Additionally, some notes from the August 18th meeting were distributed to executive committee members ahead of time by the board office. Although the August 18th meeting was held remotely for public health reasons, at that time an in-person meeting was required. Still, for the sake of having a complete record of our meetings, if there is no objection, we will adopt these notes. Committee members, if you object to adopting the notes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Okay. Seeing no objections, the notes from the August 18th meeting are adopted. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. First, no one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. Any and all such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information, such as an email address or a link that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Once a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. And last but not least, we are required by New York State law to have a transcript of this meeting. So please keep all questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. I will now deliver my chair's report. And I do not have too much, but I do want to catch up everybody on some things. So since our August 18th meeting where we were discussing open meetings law, as we all know, the governor called a special session with state Senate leadership and called a special session and amended the open meetings law to allow us to meet virtually. The option to meet virtually was extended until January of 2022. So this is obviously very good news. It takes into consideration public health. It takes into consideration that people are utilizing this option to attend meetings that they weren't able to attend before. So of course, we're very happy for this. But I want to send particular thanks to the other Manhattan Community Board chairs and to the Borough President's office for standing in solidarity with us on this particular topic and really advocating for us. But I also want to thank the board office, particularly Jesus, Brendan, and Alexandra for all of their work this summer as we were trying to figure out how to meet remotely, how to meet safely, and to take precautions when no such guidances existed from the state or elsewhere. So really wonderful job by the board office and just cannot thank them enough for their work on this. Next up, as many people know, Adam stepped down as the chair of Land Use and Waterfront Committee. This presents an opportunity to really rethink the way committee structure is working. One of the things that I had discussed with Adam before he had left, and which I would like to implement, and I'm obviously conferring with the executive committee, is to have land use take strategic community planning back under their purview, as the MSBI site obviously did not go ahead with the sale. And while there's still some discussions to be had on that, I do not think that it warrants another committee to be working on that when much of it overlaps with land use anyway. So before I move on about that, are there any questions or comments on land use taking over strategic community planning and putting that back in? Sandy, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to mention that the reason that that committee was actually formed, it was to investigate the 197A. And I think some of the people on land use really felt that we should be investigating a new 197A. Through our discussions, that was not the case, but there seem to be many things that in the 197A haven't been pursued. And actually, MSBI was just one of the issues that were addressed. So it may be a bit of a misnomer to say it's the committee's all about MSBI. And we still really want to investigate those things. And we may get a little bit of pushback from some of the members on the committee who thought we should be looking at ways to pursue those 197A issues. So just to make it, clear.
Gene, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I understand that, Sandy, and I think that's a valid point. I also think that that committee could be a working group or a task force within the land use committee and do its work equally well. It really doesn't require full-time committee work to go over the 197A plan and find out where the holes are. It may later on, if it turns out that there are a million potholes all over the place, then maybe Kyle could rethink it. But I think for right now, it would work better.
Yeah, so that's basically my reasoning for it is obviously a separate committee requires, board staff and time and all of that stuff to be devoted to it. Having this be part of land use's regular work or having a working group or a subcommittee even, I think warrants it. And then if something does come up where it does need to be separated out again, I have no problem doing it at that time. I just think for right now, after in consultation, even with Kavitha and Wells, who are leadership on strategic community planning, that I would like to put it back under land use. All right. Are there any other questions or comments on that before I move ahead? All right, seeing none, but Sandy, good segue. So I'd like to announce tonight that I'll be appointing Sandy as the chair of Land Use and Waterfront. She did just step down as the chair of transportation, so I want to thank her for taking on this leadership role. And in particular, she'll be taking this on until June of 2022. She will serve as the chair, but also as a mentor towards Kavitha and Wells, who will be serving as co-vice chairs. And the idea is to provide leadership opportunities to newer members on the board and really develop our leadership bench and knowledge base on the board as well. So I want to thank Sandy for taking on this role just after stepping down from another demanding leadership role and serving as a mentor to Kavitha and Wells on this. So I want to thank you, Sandy, for your leadership in taking on this role. Some other housekeeping as well. Abby Krusmark has been appointed as the Vice Chair of Housing and Homelessness. Anju Suresh has been appointed the Vice Chair of Health and Human Services. And Seema Shah has been appointed as the Vice Chair of Public Safety. So I want to thank everybody else for their commitment to this work and for taking on these leadership roles. And obviously, the way we're working with these leadership roles is a lot different than before. We're really going to get these vice chairs engaged and involved in all of their work. These are people who will be future leaders of the committees themselves and on our board. So I want to thank them for all of their dedication to this work and continued efforts. And so congratulations to all of the new appointees as vice chairs. And then last but not least, I just want to reiterate something to the committee. I know we had this discussion a couple of months before, but of course, things like open meetings law and public health has taken precedent. But one of the things that we had talked about at the beginning of this year was about resolutions and making sure that they're not only submitted on time to the board office, because that affects the package that the board office sends out to the committee, but it also works in terms of building relationships with the community and making sure that we're fully transparent. And one of the things that I want to urge the committee chairs is to really reinforce this at the committee level when you're assigning resolutions to people, to really start thinking ahead of these things and getting resolutions produced ahead of time for discussion at your actual committee meeting. One of the things that we saw across committees several times last year was a lot of people from the public coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to be able to participate and have some input in some of these resolutions that we're discussing. But because we didn't have anything constructed, we had to refer them to the full board meeting, which of course is a little bit different because they don't actually get to ask questions during the resolution discussion part. So one of the things that I would like everybody to do is, as you're thinking about particular topics and your agenda items and things of that nature, is to have resolutions, doesn't have to be completely done, but to have some structure that can be discussed at the committee itself. And if you're not sure which way it's going one way or the other, please do, create space for committee discussion and the idea that the resolution might go one way or the other, but to have something that is presentable and workable at the committee meeting is something that will go a long way in not only our board efficiency, but also building public transparency and trust and having engaging public input. So I just want to reiterate that if anyone wants to connect one-on-one about tactics and strategies in best practices to actually get that done, obviously reach out to me and we can have those discussions, because of course every committee works differently with their resolutions. All right, so that concludes it for me. I'll now turn it over to Jesus Perez, CB6 District Manager.
All right, thank you, Kyle. I wanted to that's a good segue for what I wanted to discuss in my report. I want to announce something that we're going to try with our resolutions. As you can imagine, I've had an opportunity to look at the open meetings law text a lot over these last few months out of necessity. And, one of the things that I found in there is something that we sort of haven't really been doing the way the open meetings law would like. In past, we really wouldn't let the public, for example, have advanced copies of resolutions that have yet to be passed at full board. Now, in reviewing the open meetings law, that actually is not the way it should go. If a member of the community wants to see a draft version of a reso, the community board should provide it to them if a copy exists. So one of the things that I think we can try with this to sort of solve this problem is I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Can everyone see? All right, you've got our website here. If you go to the resolutions tab and you click on this, you will be taken to this database. Can everyone see the database? All right. Yeah. Now this is the resolution tracker. Once a resolution has passed full board, it is prepared for dissemination to all the relevant agencies, and it is put here on our website so that anyone can access it. As you recall, as we've mentioned several times, we do try and do a good job of categorizing these, tagging these resolutions in a way that makes it very easy to search. And we understand, we know that this resource has been used more and more by board members and has been appreciated more and more by board members, and we're glad that it's there for board members. Since this already exists, once a committee has passed a resolution, some of these resolutions come to us relatively quickly. Invariably, there's always one or two that are stragglers and they don't come to us until the day of full board, but most of the resolutions do come on time. So what happened, the problem with that is that can oftentimes delay, as Kyle said, the resolution packet that we send out. We like to try and send it a day or two before full board, but if not all the resos are in, we don't want to be sending multiple copies and multiple emails when we understand that everyone's busy and you all get a lot of emails. So we just hold the thing until everything is in. Now, when resolutions come to us from now on, we're going to put them here on the resolution tracker, and they will be marked as draft very prominently. And if someone clicks on the text, they will be able to see text indicating that this is a resolution. We will start putting number lines on all our draft resolutions because that will make it look more like a draft. And two, I think it'll be easier for the members to discuss this at full board if they want to, rather than having to say the 7th whereas or this or that. They can just refer to a line number directly, and that way this will be here for people who want to see it. They can, for members of the public who want to see it, they can see it. For members of the board who want to see these, they can read them ahead of time rather than having to, digest, half a dozen resolutions the afternoon before full board. I think this will be something that will help us be in conformity with the transparency requirements of the open meetings law, but also allow board members to better familiarize themselves with the resolutions that they're voting on, to do any background research that they need to, because assuming that the committees get us these resolutions well in advance, they will be there ready, and we don't have to just hold them like we did in the past. Does this make sense?
Yes.
All right. So starting with the resolutions that are going to be up for October's full board, we'll put them up. At the beginning, we'll remind the members, hey, this thing is here, the resos are here. You want to in advance look at them, here they are. Because once they're done, written by the committees and come to the office, they don't really change after that until they get to full board, if there may be some amendments or something like that. But this way, a good way to share these resolutions, be transparent, and be in compliance with the open meetings law. So unless there are any questions.
I see a question from B.
Yeah, so Jesus, I have two questions.
Sure.
Will this be a PDF so no one could change this?
It will. This test copy that we have here, if you want to go to our website and view it yourself, it is a PDF. Yes, they will be PDFs.
Okay. And the other thing, and I don't know if you want to use it, but I always use it. It's called, I use pre-decisional or pre-adoption. So just to make sure, because these things have a tendency to circulate. I know you have the watermark of draft, but I think you have to be careful what circulates in the community. Just a suggestion.
Yes. Yeah. You were saying, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what the suggestion is.
Oh, so the suggestion is you have draft on it, but when you have the resolution title, it should have something that says pre-decisional or pre-voting. So it's really clear what a draft means.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly do that. And here in the actual tracker, we clearly have marked in all caps draft. But yeah, we'll try this out, see how it works. I see additional people.
Yeah, maybe we could put something in parentheses, like not yet voted on, even like that.
Yes.
Gene? Oh yeah.
Exactly. There is a little blurb, saying that this is not
Right.
voted on if it's passed at full board. We tried to be as explicit as possible.
Right. Gene, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, B asked the question I was going to ask, so I'll ask the other silly one, which is, Jesus, you don't want us to write these in Latin, do you?
For transportation resos, I think yes, they should be.
Okay, because I used to be pretty fluent, so I'll just brush up and you'll get them, and good luck.
Or cuneiform, we will accept cuneiform.
Well, sometimes they do read like Latin. So.
That's true. That's true. Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, awesome. Sandy, go ahead.
Jesus, what other boards do this? I'm just curious.
I don't know how many other boards do this. I don't know whether the other boards realize that it's there. I mean, after as many years in the job that I have, I just noticed that in that little provision in there now. But it does say there that if somebody wants a copy, we should give it to them.
And I'm guessing there's a reason the other boards don't do it. Like some of these things are very controversial, and as B said, they get out. So just wondering why we want to be the groundbreakers.
Those are very valid questions. Again, I don't know whether any boards do precisely this. It's certainly something that I can check. And we have had resolutions get out before.
Right.
But again, sometimes if we were a legislative body, for example, sometimes pieces of legislation are controversial, and those are made available to the public too. And yes, people will discuss, but whatever passes at full board, that's what's official. We haven't really had all that many instances, I think, of things getting out unnecessarily.
Yeah. So just go ahead, Jesus.
No. I'm
Yeah.
done with
So
that.
I was just going to say from our end, so first of all, this came up because since I've taken over as chair, we've seen this actually at several different times. at the committee levels, or people from the public have actually said, we would like to see a copy. We haven't seen it, and we've said we don't have a resolution drafted in this. That's the point of the conversation. But one of the things that we realized as we were reviewing open meetings law, as we were consulting with everyone, is that this is actually something that the public has a right to access. So one of the things that I would like to do is, and this is why I asked Jesus to kind of think up some ways that we could do this, is to make sure that we are coming in with things that can be discussable. So that's why, a resolution that doesn't necessarily have a defined resolve yet. Maybe it's something that's still being up for deliberation. Or maybe it's something that has been discussed for several months that does have some defined resolve. The idea is that people can have the opportunity to review it and discuss at committee level rather than coming to full board meetings and not necessarily having that interactive opportunity to have their input or to have their questions answered, which could actually mitigate a lot of the issues that we sometimes see between community boards and the public, where maybe they don't understand the thought process that went into a decision. The other thing was a lot of the other boards don't even necessarily use Airtable. One of the things that our board has been really great about has been to be proactive on digitizing things and making things accessible, and to really be transparent in our decision-making processes and resources available. So since these are decisions that we're going to make anyway and possibly are up for debate with the public or some sort of reaction one way or the other, it doesn't necessarily exacerbate that at all. So it may not. It just gives an opportunity for people to bring those questions and concerns to the committee level, rather than some of the things that we've seen already taken place, where people say we made a decision, or we did this, we did that, and we didn't, or that was discussed at the committee level and part of the decision-making process for resolutions. So that was my thinking behind it.
And we are also hoping that these resolutions can get to the board members' hands sooner. Again, most board members will not get to see these resolutions until the day of, the afternoon of full board. And I can imagine that it's preferable to have, as much time as possible with these resolutions to read them if you're going to be voting on them, rather than just to be handed these things at the last minute without having an appropriate amount of time to consider them.
Mm-hmm. Sandy?
Just that we seem to be, we're trying about two different things. One is having them ready for the actual committee meeting, and the other is having them in advance of the full board. So will there be sort of a deadline? Oh, we'll send you out all the resolutions we have as of this date, and then the next one is just before full board, so that we don't get continuous updates of resolutions? Does that make sense to you?
I think the easiest thing, at least since we're just starting this, the easiest thing might be to, on the resolutions that pass committee, once they are written and they are approved by the chair of the committee and then sent to the office, at that point, normally what would happen is the office would just sit on them until all the resos come in. At that point, though, from now on, we'll just put them here. We'll properly label them as draft, and then that'll be that. At that point, they really shouldn't be changing until full board, if even then. And as far as Kyle's suggestion that the board should redouble its efforts to have resolutions ready for committees to consider, for the benefit of discussion, that's a good suggestion, and that can still be done, but maybe at least at the beginning, we don't necessarily have to put those up here, because at that point, those have not been passed by any committee and aren't necessarily on their way to full board.
Right. Yeah, the idea behind that is that you have something prepared for the committee itself, not to be published up on this. And the idea is that after that committee discussion, a resolution that's either edited or created would then be sent to us to put on this. So it's fine up until that point. I'll leave it to the work styles of every individual chair here to figure out how they want to prepare for their committee meetings with such resolutions. But it's after that committee meeting where you've discussed it that you should then send it to us as soon as possible so that we can put these up beforehand so people have a chance to review them more in depth. Gene?
Yeah, just an additional point. One of the things I think you need to keep in mind about this is the fact that Transpo, as well as land use and a couple other committees, often get materials coming in from some city agency, in our case DOT, a couple of days before our meeting.
Right.
So that'll have an impact on your plans about resos in advance of committee meetings. I just want to point that out.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah. And that's why, again, we understand that every committee operates differently just by the nature of the work and the way the agencies that we depend on function. But to the best of our ability that we could do these things is what we're really trying to urge here. So there are some topics that are on transportation or land use that we could, do in advance or get something, in a document that could be discussed. So it's really getting to that sort of practice to make sure that we have something at hand, because that's the number one thing that after every committee meeting or every full board that I get an email about is someone saying, why didn't we have a chance to talk about this? And I was like, well, you should go to committees. That's where committee business is conducted. And they say, oh, they didn't have anything for us to show. This is the first time we're seeing a resolution. So I know sometimes, that's obviously not always going to be the practice, but the best of our ability to get something that can be discussable is what we're trying to aim for.
I'd also add that, since we've been cleaning up the language on the agendas for people to look at, that is actually all the committee often has to go on as well.
Right.
So if they're interested in this topic, they shouldn't necessarily need a draft resolution of something that we don't know necessarily the ins and outs of yet. They should just know that the topic is there and what the angles are that we're going to discuss it. I'd suggest that might be at first a way to go to make sure that that language on the agendas, on the website and elsewhere is consistent so that it's readable and legible to people. And then you're still perfectly validated in saying, well, it was on the agenda. These items were on the agenda. And if you're interested in them, you should show up for the committee meeting, because it's exactly what committee members mostly have to do. Same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's exactly what the office has been trying to do for the longest time, to when the agenda items come in, to sort of try to massage them so that they can be rendered into plain English and made, if they're not exactly necessarily, they're a bit perhaps too heavy on jargon, to make them more appealing to people who may just be casual observers of the community board. And they might think, oh, yeah, that looks like something interesting. I'd like to go to that. I mean, we don't expect everyone to come to every meeting, but for committee members or members of the board who sit on other committees or members of the general public, we try very hard to make the language of these agenda items such that they might pique the interest of anyone in our district.
So do I, Jesus. We're working on the same team.
Wonderful.
Any other questions or any other components to your report, Jesus?
No, I've taken up enough time, I think, and I'll be piping up throughout the meeting. So I think I'll leave it there. That concludes my report.
Perfect. Thank you, Jesus. All right, we'll now move on to review of next month's committee agendas. And we'll start off with Gene, transportation.
Okay, well, we'll see how successful I was in terms of wording these agenda items then.
Mm-hmm.
They should be fairly self-evident in terms of what they are. We are going to have these two city council bills on the on the delivery workers are companion pieces to the Carlina Rivera intro that we passed at full board last time out. And it's a good time to do that. For those of you who are interested, I can send this around or you can find it yourself. There was a fabulous article in the city about a week and a half ago, that drilled deep into the lives of these guys and how they have to deal with this stuff. The detail was horrific, as well as very, very finely tuned. And so it's really motivated us to take a look at this and try to get them some more of what they need. So that's what those two things are. We will have with any luck. Brendan is working on this. One of these bills, each of these bills is sponsored by a different city council member. We should have representatives from each of their offices to answer questions because, as you can see, Carlina's thing was fairly straightforward. They should be able to use the bathrooms. These are a little more technical, especially the second one, item 2, is gonna require a little explication, I expect, for committee members who are gonna wanna know about what exactly this means. How do you, including income equipment, how are we doing this? So we're gonna want somebody from the office there to explain what they were thinking when they drafted this. So those are those 2 things. And then we are gonna, last month at the end of August, as Bea knows, she was there, Brian knows, we started very, very basic way to discuss redesigning the area around Grand Central Terminal to make it more pedestrian friendly. There are a number of reasons for this. One is that the west side of Grand Central Terminal it's already happening to. Another is that we passed that reso again at full board that redesigns Lexington Avenue to make it more pedestrian friendly. Next year, I believe, the train shed north of Grand Central Terminal will be coming off. Park Avenue will be ripped up. And when they finally put it back together again, that is going to be more pedestrian friendly in one of the 3 or 5 designs that they're currently circulating to do that. So our piece should be upgraded to be consistent with that. So what we're starting with is the areas in the East 40s between East 43rd, East 44th, East 45th, East 46th. To take a look at those and see what kinds of things we want to do with them, whether it's a shared street, a pedestrian plaza, some other kind of cocktail. And then a few blocks south, the upper 30s up to 40th Street on Park Avenue, to see if we can do something with that space as well so that Grand Central is surrounded by more of a pedestrian friendly environment than it's been, well, in my whole lifetime. Because I think the time is right for that. And in fact, so does DOT, because when we presented this at the meeting, Colleen Shattergun was like, your timing is perfect. This is what we're looking at. This is what we want to do. So, you know, that's what we'll be doing. And in terms of upcoming stuff, Kevin, one of the reasons I called you out before, but I didn't get a chance to say this, was that Kyle and I have talked about this a bit. Thanks to Ida, I'm one of the millions of people who are thinking about things like bioswales and permeable surfaces on our streets and everything else. I think we can get the ball rolling between your committee, my committee, initially just the 2 of us talking. I mean, maybe we can brainstorm a few locations, whether they're at first by parks or wherever they happen to be, just to start looking to see how we can get some of this new infrastructure installed to try to mitigate the flooding the next time we get 9.5 inches of rain in a day. So that's basically the what I'm looking at right now.
I'm on board. Whatever collaboration you want to start, I'm there.
Okay, good deal. I knew I'd have to twist your arm.
Gene, just a question about the first 2 intros that you'll be discussing about the delivery workers. Shouldn't this be something that's on business affairs agenda rather than transportation? What is the reasoning for it being on transportation?
Because they were bikers and we've been dealing with the delivery worker stuff. That was it.
All right. Would you mind if we put that onto business affairs? Because I think that'd be a more appropriate committee.
Okay. Sure.
You have an objection to it, or?
Well, you know, not really. I mean, it's just that, like I said, it's just legacy stuff, and we've been handling it. If you want to move it, that's okay.
Right, because this is.
Oh, Claire, go ahead.
Yeah. I was saying that we could, like, encourage. I do see the overlap.
Okay.
But
yeah, I mean, it was just, it's like I said, it's basically legacy. We've been dealing with e-bikes and delivery workers and all that stuff for years. So it was just that.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm reading it more as like business practice, but we can figure that out offline. Jesus, were you just about to speak?
No. But just to be clear, we're moving item number 2 or item number 1 and 2.
I think 1 and 2 makes sense, but
So Carl, I was gonna
Yeah.
have my hand up. Can I
Go
make a
ahead, Dee.
suggestion that maybe this be done jointly,
could be done what?
by both committees?
Sure.
Because transportation has been dealing with bikers and the whole question of bikes and delivery. I guess it should have started there or should have been taken up, but we spent a lot of time on it. So if both, and I do agree it's business too. So if you could figure out a way of having both committees working on part of it, it would be great.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that in concept. I think that because there is overlap, the ideal would be to have both committees handle it. But I do want to say that probably the overriding concern for us is the logistical difficulty of having 2 different committees, having to either have a joint meeting or to consider it separately. If any of those concerns get in the way, I think you should probably just choose one committee for it. And as somebody who sits on transportation, I don't think it really matters which committee handles it, but I do know that there are people on transportation that do feel like they're invested in the backstory of this particular topic, and that there's some useful stuff going on in transportation in terms of the history. And I'm sure there are some people on business affairs that may feel that way, but they feel like they have some sort of background on the topic. But if it gets to a point where it seems like it's a really fresh topic for business affairs and nobody really knows what's going on, I mean, that is one of the advantages of transportation, is that there's a lot of people with background on that committee.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think what we can do is, Claire, if you want to bring this up at your September meeting for just discussion, and then bring whatever comments come out of that to the Transportation Committee, either to Jean directly by email or participating in the meeting on the 4th. I think we'd have proper coverage.
I think that's a good idea. And I can also encourage members of my committee who feel passionate about it, or who, it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes on things too. So even though we might not have been discussing this for a while, there might be some people who have energy and want to kind of dive into it on our committee too. So I can bring it up next week.
Yes,
and then also encourage them to.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that actually we'll be happy to invite your entire committee or anyone who's part thereof to come to the meeting and do this, if you want to work it out that way, by the two-step thing where you've got, like Kyle said, you throw it out there for the committee to make comments on, and then anybody who does want to come to our meeting to follow up if they have specific questions or they have more drive and interest in the topic itself. That'd be fine.
Okay, perfect. So let's just leave it as is.
Okay.
Transportation.
Just to be clear, I'm sorry, just to be clear. So should I put these agenda items on Claire's September BASA agenda as formal agenda items, and as well as also leave them here as October transportation items?
I think so. What do you think, Claire?
They can be official items, but I was thinking more of like maybe in my report I can talk about them. I mean, we wouldn't have the people that Jean is trying to get to discuss them. And I don't really feel I can do my research ahead of time, but we have other stuff going on next week too. So
those would just
or you could do it during new business.
Yeah.
Jesus, just to cut in, I see people have their hands up, but just to cut back in before I forget. In my desperate attempt for clarity on these agenda items, the thing I forgot to put in at the end was possible reso, so that people do know that we're going to be possibly writing a reso about these things. So,
right. So you actually did put that in, but we took that out for.
Oh, okay, I didn't forget.
Yeah, you didn't forget. No, that was sort of a relic of something that we used to do years ago, and then we stopped. And so just to make them all consistent, we took that out.
Okay, is there a reason we stopped? Because this goes back to the earlier discussion about letting people know that we're actually, these are things that, as opposed to say the possible street redesign around Grand Central Terminal, this is something that is actually going to produce possibly a reso at this meeting. So if you want it, if you're interested in it and you want to talk about it, now's good.
I think that the rationale for removing it is that potentially any item could parliamentarily become a reso. And
Of
so
course.
sort of,
Of course, but if we're flagging these as in particular ways that we're aiming to get a reso out of it, even if we don't succeed, which happened, then at least the public knows that we're aiming to try to produce a reso on this. And so this would be the time that they have to show up. That's
well, we can put that back in for these.
okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, Brian and Matt, didn't mean to jump the line, but I just noticed that was gone and I was pretty sure I put it in there.
All right. Brian, go ahead. All right. Maybe his hand was left up from before. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Kyle. I just wanted, I know that we're not really discussing the merits of the resolution or of the bills or a resolution. I just thought in the interest of full transparency, you should all know that I'm an attorney for the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and that third-party delivery apps are within my bucket of responsibilities. And I wanted to let everybody know that. Obviously, I won't be voting on it. And I won't be discussing it, but because this could be construed as a discussion, I thought I might as well be safe than sorry, let everybody know that.
Appreciate that, Matt. That's noted. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? The last thing, Gene, and I'll talk to you about this, but one of the things we were talking with Washington Irving High School about that whole situation there. One of the things that I'd like to do is to request particular parking spaces in that area. So that's something I'll actually draft for you for this meeting, for parking spaces for school use and school purposes. So we can add that to the agenda too, and that should be something relatively quick, but we'll add that as maybe number 4. Yeah. And we can talk more offline about all of that stuff.
Good. Yeah, I want to know more about that.
Yeah. All right. Any questions, comments for transportation? Matt, your hand is still up. Is that a separate question or same hand?
Same hand, sorry, I'll take it down.
No worries. All right, so moving on to environment and parks.
Okay, number 1 should be self-explanatory. This was proactive on the hotel's part, so we will be considering that. Sorry, number 2 looks embryonic. It is because we're looking at a number of spaces. Question is, should we list some of the spaces that we're looking at to become available for public use? It won't necessarily be all of them, but at least we can sprinkle in a couple if that makes sense.
So I was going to ask you about the specific agenda item. Have you already highlighted spaces that you want to talk about in particular, or are you kind of information gathering rather than highlighting?
No, we're coming more out of the information gathering stage and actually trying to, affect some change. So for the open spaces, one of them is the Bellevue hospital space and on First Avenue, and another one is Sterling Plaza on Second Avenue, which is a POPS. So those are 2 that we can, get into detail on. I don't want it to be stated that this is all encompassing of others, because we're still looking into.
Yeah, so that's what I was confused about, if it was like an all encompassing thing or you want to talk about specific sites. But then to push on that too, what exactly will you be speaking about? Will you need speakers to come from any of these?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I would love, and I had sent a note around about that, and any assistance who would be, whether it's the advisory board at Bellevue or anyone else, we would love to see why that outdoor green space is gated up just south of the hospital. And we have not reached out to anybody within the Bellevue community yet, but I'm all ears about who we should potentially contact as a speaker or as somebody that can give us some background.
Cool. Yeah, we'll help on that at the office level, but if anyone else has very specific contacts or friends, definitely do let us know.
And if you talk about speakers about the issue itself and community leaders, yes. Again, we have not identified a couple of people. There's actually somebody outside of the state that seemed very interesting, but I think, what's our position on that? If we're bringing in, let's say, call them thought leaders, try to stick within the city or have we branched out if we feel that they truly are, more experts than somebody who may be stationed in New York.
Yeah, I think if they're sharing expertise, there's nothing wrong with that. We've done things like that with health and other topics. But obviously, the more local, the better. When we have an expert who also knows about the specific issue rather than talking about the topic generally or as applicable to every space. But if you have a really great speaker who can speak academically about this and is qualified to speak about it, I don't see an issue with that.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So we're still working on that.
But I would also suggest if there are people from the community who have expressed interest in accessing these spaces. I think that was one of the big things that was very helpful with the St. Martin Park private garden was that there was very much a drive from the community itself, parents, students, etc. Who said, hey, I'd really like to use this. So if you can get speakers like that as well, who have talked about it, definitely invite them, not necessarily as a speaking role, but to have as part of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And school leaders, which is part of the St. Martin effort. There's a lot of school parent associations. I'm finding out more and more that are very active in these type of issues. Speaking of St. Martin, I did not make that a separate issue, but since the trial period hasn't started yet, I swung by there this morning. The gates are still locked. But mid-September was the target date by Parks Department. I think we should put a separate here on a review of how that pilot program is going. I expect the Department of Parks and Recreation to mention it in the report, but I think it's gotten to be a broad enough issue with a lot of people in the community engaged.
Yeah, and we're working on that letter too, you and I, to talk about what are the standards, what are the measurables, et cetera. But I think also part of this conversation can be what are the measurables that we want to see as a community board in this review.
Absolutely. We need to know what those metrics are so we can hit them. As far as Department of Parks and Recreation, gosh, since I've been on the community board, and probably Mark, you can probably fill in a date before that. The district manager for parks has been Wes Hamilton. Wesley has been reassigned. He will no longer be within CB6. And he is being replaced by Sheena Kaufman, who is currently a district manager for districts 10 and 11 with Marcus Garvey Park and a number of other parks in that area. So we expect Sheena to be the report spokesperson starting October 5th. She officially starts on the 27th.
Perfect. All right. All right. Are there any questions for Kevin and Environment and Parks?
Yes, Kevin, the new park manager, do you have her contact or does she know to reach out to us or?
I sent her a note because I do want to talk to her about a couple of agenda items. I have not heard back, but again, she may be on break is what I heard from somebody. And she doesn't officially start again until Monday. So, but I do have her contact information and I can send it over to you.
Okay, so that we'll follow up with her after, I guess, her start date so that we can formally invite her to the committee, unless you've already done that.
I've done that, but I don't think there's any harm in follow-up from the office.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, just either forward us that email that you sent to her or send us her
I will
contact.
do that. And I'm sorry I didn't copy you on it. I should have.
No problem. And regarding the discussion, we've reworked the language for your item number 2, discussion of Sterling Plaza POPs, Bellevue Hospital Park Space, and other open spaces unavailable for public use in Community District 6. Is this okay?
That looks good.
All right. And there was a lot of talk of like who to invite and, are you, we can help try and find some contacts at Bellevue.
Yeah, I would love, Bellevue, I would really like to have that contact. I don't think it needs to be a separate agenda item if that's what you're asking here about that we're going to be, exploring who to invite. We could, but I think it's fine the way it is.
Oh, I guess my question is, are we going to have speakers for this October 5th meeting that the office needs to?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, I like Kyle's point though, people in the community, if they're willing to speak, but that they would just speak during the public session. So I don't think we need to necessarily reserve a special spot for them.
Okay. Well, we'll advertise it in the newsletter to get the word out then.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for environment and parks? All right, thank you very much, Kevin.
Welcome.
All right, next up, strategic community planning. Kavitha did ask for a last meeting to close out. So Kavitha, do you want to talk about what you will be discussing at the meeting?
Sure. And it's mainly, I don't know how much you guys may have mentioned it already. And I know Kyle, you sent out the note to everybody that strategic planning committee is basically going away. I just want to tie up any loose ends we had with the committee and things people had been working on. As you know, one of our biggest projects with MSBI has changed entirely with them staying put. It doesn't go away. You know, there are buildings they're selling, but we did think that the things that were remaining could be folded into land use. But given that there's a few things in terms of waterfront access remapping of roads and community engagement initiatives that we had been starting, that we just want to see like where does that transition, and it'll likely transition into the appropriate committees, most likely through land use, or there might be health related stuff that I coordinate with LV, in terms of the services and everything like that. So I just didn't want to leave people out in the dark when we kind of did all these changes over the summer without the committee being involved. So that's really the main focus. It should be a pretty brief meeting, and then really just seeing where, although there's a lot of overlap with the members, we did make a huge effort with strategic planning to have members from pretty much every other committee on there. It would be nice to be able to see if we can transition folks either into land use or somewhere that they could still continue their work.
Right, thank you, Kavitha.
Kavitha, the language we have for the agenda item, I wasn't sure exactly, this is not a usual agenda item, but is this okay?
The future of the committees. Yeah, I mean, maybe transitioning or things. Yeah, the future of the committee's projects is fine if you're fine with that, Kyle.
Yeah.
I can maybe even send out a note to people just so they know what.
Or you could say and transition to land use, something like that. All right, are there any questions? Yep, Sandy, I see your hand up.
I was just going to say that I don't think everything does transition to land use, so maybe we shouldn't.
It doesn't necessarily.
Yeah.
I guess in
So
this
maybe-
case, in this case, being a little vague probably is a benefit.
Yeah, okay. We'll just leave it as is then. All right, any questions, comments for Kavitha? All right, thank you, Kavitha. We'll move on to budget and governmental affairs. Reshma, are you there? Is Reshma there? Okay, let's move on and go back if Reshma rejoins.
Actually, there's one note about full board. We have received a request from the Racial Justice Commission, which is a city entity, and they would like 5 to 7 minutes at full board to give a brief presentation about their work. They want to inform the community about how the Racial Justice Commission begins to dismantle structural racism in city government. And they say that their presentation can be as long as 20 minutes, but they can also keep it down to like 5 to 7, depending on what we request. Is this something we'd be willing to entertain at full board?
I feel like this is something that could be put into committee, but maybe we could give them, the same opportunity to just introduce themselves and say that they are doing a presentation at one of the committee meetings. What do you think about that, Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you guys would prefer. I mean, I think they would prefer just to do a thing, but if at full board, but if you guys would really rather prefer that they do it at a committee, and I guess maybe the Public Safety Commission. I'm sorry, the Public Safety.
So that's what I was thinking, either public safety or even health and human services, possibly. I don't know what their exact angle is.
This seems like a human rights topic, so I guess public safety was the
Yeah.
one that absorbed
Mhm.
human rights.
Okay. Yeah, I see some hands up about this. Seema?
Yeah, I was actually at an event this morning, like my first conference type thing, and one of the keynote speakers was Jennifer Jones Austin, who is the executive director of FPWA, the formerly the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, which is, like I'm sure everyone knows more than me, like a very, very prominent nonprofit organization in New York. I think she's the one. I read her bio, I think, and I just wanted to ask if you knew, Jesus. I think she was appointed to lead this commission. And I just very quickly glanced at her bio as she was speaking and keynoting. But if it is her, I actually think it might be a good idea to let her and the organization speak at full board. Because she's like just a super, I mean, I don't know if she'll do the actual presentation. If I had to guess, she won't, but I think she's going to be like a real powerhouse. I think even in the new administration, I think it'd be nice to be on her organization's good side, and she just spoke so powerfully about structural racism that I feel like it'd be a missed opportunity for us if we didn't have the entity speak to everyone.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we can figure that out. Yeah, my concern is mostly that at a full board meeting, by the time someone does come up to present, that sometimes it doesn't necessarily land because so much has been discussed and so much is left to discuss. And particularly on a topic like this, I want people to pay attention. But yeah, we can see if it's someone who's a prominent speaker, then that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it is Jennifer Jones. Jennifer Jones Austin is the chair of that commission.
And she'll be the one presenting?
That is not clear.
Okay.
It was a staff member it was the Deputy Executive Director for External Affairs of the Racial Justice Commission who reached out. I can reach back and say, hey, if Ms. Jones Austin gives the presentation, yes, or though if
yeah, I just think it'd be interesting for us to get to know her and for her to get to know us. I mean, I just was so impressed by her work that she presented on.
Okay. Here we go for the B, your hand is up.
Yeah, I kind of know her from other work. I will tell you, I think it's politically smart for us to have met the full board meeting, given what's going to happen with new city government and the direction. So I would echo what was just said. If you can give 5 to 7 minutes, I think it's an important subject, and I think it's important for us to highlight it.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, I just agree. I know Jennifer, and if she's speaking, the whole room will be riveted by whatever she says. So I think it's great politically, and also she's really, really interesting. So if it's her, definitely. So that'd be great.
And so in the case that it's not her, what do people think? Jean, your hand is up. Jean?
Sorry, yeah, no, I turned the video on and not the mic.
Right.
Yeah, I was one alternative then, depending on who's doing the presentation, because I agree if it's her, full board would be good. But if she's going to just be there and help field questions or whatever, maybe it would be a good idea to turn the public safety meeting into a kind of public hearing about this and let them do their full 20-minute thing there, which we can't do at full board because it's already a train wreck half the time. And go that way. If it's her, then fine. Then I agree with B, Mark, and Seema.
Seema, is your hand up again?
Sorry, no, it's not.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just throw the question out to the committee again. I think obviously if Jennifer is there, we have her present, but if it's someone else, what are people thinking? Should we put it to public safety? If it's an outreach person or someone who's not her? Sandy?
I think we should let them present at full board. It covers much wider, realm of people, and we can encourage her to come. But if she can't make it, that's okay too. I mean, we have presentations by elected officials that are 20 minutes. I think everybody's willing to do that.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think full board might be a great platform, but it doesn't really allow for depth on the subject. So it might come across as if we're shortchanging the time just to move the agenda along versus giving it the time it deserves. So I'm happy to offer some time during the public safety.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, what we can ask them is to do an introductory type presentation overview, and for the more specific things in an ongoing relationship, we can connect them to Matt and Seema about putting together some type of program, even if it's like a public program on this particular topic. All right, so we'll figure that out, Jesus. Let's hear back who exactly will be presenting, and we can take it from there.
Okay.
All right. Good to move on to Health and Human Services. Or Seema, is your hand up again?
No, goodness.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
I'll take it down.
I just want to
Sorry.
make sure. All right, moving on. Health and Human Services, LV. LV, I think you're on mute. No
Sorry.
problem.
So we will continue to discuss the safe staffing bill, because we haven't decided whether we want to write a resol to support the bill. And I actually would like to invite somebody from NYU and Bellevue, because I would like to know their stand on this staffing bill. Because I remember in 2016, when we opened up this topic, NYU was not supportive of this bill. So
yeah, so actually I noted to Jesus when I was also reviewing these. So the legislation actually already passed on this. So it passed in support of it. So I don't know, a resolution isn't needed because it's already done. So is there any additional thing on it, or would you like to come up with, different topics? Or one of the other things too is, since you do have the webinar next week, that October, you can cancel the meeting if you feel like there isn't enough to talk about, or we can just, start offline to come up with some other topics.
yeah, I actually would like to, I want to ask the board. There was a new release from CDC about an increase in availability of cannabis products containing Delta H, THC, and reported cases of adverse events. This THC is it's a tetrahydrocannabinol, which may not be included by suppliers in their labeling of the products. So we should ask the consumer to make sure that they label their products about these, because it can, it can give rise to psychoactive potential for consumers. So how do we go about this one?
So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe let's speak offline about topics for this, because I think there are some things that, can be agenda items, and then there are things that we can follow up on. This sounds like one of those things we can follow up on, but let's discuss offline. And now that Anju is the vice chair as well, we can get some input from her as well about some topics for this, because I don't know if that's necessarily an agenda item for a meeting, or something that we can just sort of, work on our own. So let's just keep this a work in progress. Is that okay? Alvi, are you there?
She froze.
Oh, she froze. I didn't know if it was me. I've been having internet issues. Okay, I think she actually disconnected. So let's just move on. Jesus, we'll figure that out with LV offline.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on to housing and homelessness.
Yep. So we have a long agenda here, but I don't think all these items will be long in practice. There's one intro that is worth discussing. This item 1, which would prohibit discrimination in anywhere in the housing process regarding on the basis of arrest or of criminal record. And in fact, you wouldn't, no one would be able to even ask about that. It sounds like a good bill. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. It looks like it has 26 co-sponsors, which probably is a majority under 51 council members. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't discuss it and take a position if we have a position.
Yeah, and I think this one will be particularly controversial with tenants and associations because just reading the bill a little bit, it even prohibits doing a background check on potential tenants. So I know there are people who have issues with that, or even the way it's written might be a little bit vague. So if there are ways that we can improve on it and obviously get public input on it, I think that'd be great.
Okay, so that'll be a substantive agenda item. Item 2, we'll have to do some research to find out what the situation actually is, but it is a good thing to have on the agenda. The Honda, which is the Hotel Conversion Act, and TOPA, which is the Tenant Group Purchase Act, are worth discussing. I know that there has been some movement in terms of nonprofits using Honda funds to buy properties for conversion. And so by then we'll have more information about who is doing that and what the potential is in our district. Jesus had us suggested that we put a New Providence ULURP item on because the ULURP is coming up. And we don't know whether we're going to hear it in housing or in land use, but we may end up hearing it in housing. And we'll know more before the agenda has to be prepared for this meeting.
Actually, I think our lines might have gotten crossed. I thought you wanted to put the New Providence item on there, and so that's why I have it there under tentative.
Well, go ahead.
I thought you were sort of going to sort of summarize the project for the committee based upon the information that we have. What I would suggest, because there has been a lot of interest in this particular project, and people are already looking to know what the date is for the public hearing, which we don't know yet because all we have received word from the city is that this project is likely to certify at least 30 days from now or more, but no sooner than that. So if it does, we'll probably be hearing it around November. But unless there's a very good reason for putting this item on your agenda, I would suggest maybe hold off until closer to when it certifies or when it actually certifies, because folks may be tempted to come out in droves thinking that this is the public hearing, and it won't be.
If we even put it on the agenda, then we'll get people. So I should just mention it in the chair's report if it's something that is coming up.
Yes, unless you have a substantial amount of things to talk about regarding this topic. I would.
No, this was just meant to be an update. So you can take it off.
And now, as far as the TOPA and the Honda, do you want those to be standing updates on your agenda, or do you want individual items on your agenda, or do you want to fold those into your chair's report too?
I suppose you can fold them in. I mean, we're definitely going to do them, but we're not going to have speakers for either one. Honda's underway, but we don't need a speaker to talk about that. And TOPA, I believe, is stalled.
Okay.
So, yeah, you can put those under the chair's report.
Okay, we'll fold those into the chair's report.
Okay. Any questions for Rich in housing and homelessness?
A few more operational questions. I'm sorry. So Rich, would you like us to try and find some speakers for this intro 2047?
I mean, if there's someone that would, if there's someone from a city council office that would like to speak about it, or an advocate, I'd be interested in that. I don't know anything about it. I just looked it up today and saw the sponsors.
Okay. We'll see what we can do. And as far as the Hurricane Ida one,
Have you heard anything about basement impacts in the district?
no, we got no complaints of any kind of damage of that kind. After it happened, I happened to sort of just try to walk around the district to see, I mean, you know, a few down branches here and there.
Yeah.
I didn't see a lot. I didn't see the kind of, you know, the kind of images that we were seeing, you know, out of Queens and things like that. Or
Part of that, I think, is because there's less residential here in basements. Maybe we should just ask the council members, staffs, if they know anything, because like there may not be much to talk about other than, you know, a discussion about the general risks citywide.
Okay, well, if there's not a lot to talk about regarding our district, is this something you still want on the agenda?
No, we can stuff it in the chair's report.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll do some digging to see what we can find out about this as it pertains specifically to our district.
Okay.
So I'll put it tentative for right now.
That's fine.
I see a hand up from Brian. Brian.
Yeah, it's curious that you brought up that you haven't heard anything about basement flooding in the district.
Oh, because you have one.
So yeah, nobody lives in the basement in my thing. I live on First Avenue. I live right down the block from 23rd Street, and I live in a zone that's been redrawn into different flood map territories since Sandy, which was appropriate because we got 2.5 feet of water in our basement. And more relevantly, I don't think anybody lives in these basements, but every single basement on my block was flooded after that late August 3-inch in an hour rainstorm, like totally flooded. And I think a lot of the buildings are dealing with mechanical issues as a result of it. But in our case, they didn't do anything. That water sat there for over 7 days. We didn't have hot water for 7 days. There is still moisture in the basement and now black mold growing in the hallway. Now, the thing is, I live in a condominium building. Every single residence is owned by a totally different owner. My owner lives in Florida. Every single apartment in this building is rented by somebody who does not own any of their units. There's a management company involved here, and they're criminally negligent. But there's absolutely nothing we could do because the renters, our supers are technically our unit owners and not a management company. And the unit owners are supposed to go after the management company, but I think that there's a lot of disinterest. And then also the management company, like I said, is criminally corrupt. So the issue in our district might be that there are people who are struggling with sort of DOB issues with this kind of stuff, where it's not the same as, you know, in Queens, where they literally built basement housing in a, you know, a reclaimed stream, which is what a lot of those problems were. But I think here in our district, especially close to the waterfront, there's probably been a lot of basement flooding, and it's probably like a huge insurance and maintenance issue, and it's causing a lot of delays in sort of addressing this stuff. And additionally, there's probably a lot of tenants in both regular apartments and weird setups who may be dealing with issues that they can't either report easily or that are not bubbling up to us as flooding issues. The reason why I think this is important is because our basement has flooded like 3 or 4 times in the last year. And I think this wasn't the norm. I mean, it flooded during Sandy, but it hasn't really been a problem since then. But it feels like now this is like the new normal with the amount of storms and everything that's coming through here. And I think that especially management companies and landlords really need to be on the ball about this. And there needs to be a legislative response if these companies think it's just business as usual and they could just send a maintenance man to like look at a gigantic flooded basement and do nothing.
So maybe it's a conversation about the potential legislative response to issues like this.
Yeah, it's just that my case is like very niche. There's not a lot of condominiums that are formed in walk-up buildings.
But I'm sure that there are other people who don't live in the basement, but who are dealing with basement flood damage that the management company and owners are slow to address because they're not personally affected.
Yeah, especially with services like hot water. I don't think I'm going to have heat this winter because that heater was under 2.5 feet of water and they didn't touch it. And so also like, mold issues, dampness. We have had way more bugs in the last 2 weeks than we've ever seen. That might be a big problem for a lot of people who are living in housing that isn't being addressed with this. That's not specifically upland, especially because the drainage issues, it doesn't matter if you're on high ground or not, that water just needs to run somewhere, and it does run into basements.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it could be even written more generally. I'll take responsibility for that language. That's the language I suggested. Because the angle that I was thinking about is obviously we heard the horrific stories of particularly the outer boroughs where people were drowning in their basement apartments. A lot of times these things are kind of done off the books. So we might not even find data for people who are living in basement dwellings for X, Y, and Z reasons. But thinking about how particularly those individuals didn't have any legal protections. And even though like geographically or infrastructurally, it might not be an issue for our district, about how we could be, taking a proactive approach to such things. But maybe it's not just specifically about basement dwellings, but maybe we could focus it on just the impact of, Hurricane Ida on, I don't know, housing issues, utilities, etc., things like that. And basements could be one of the components of the discussion.
Yeah, I think for us, it's more of a utilities thing where, it was like the problems we had after Sandy where so many commercial and infrastructure buildings had critical stuff in the basement inadvisedly, and then they were offline for days or weeks. I think now we might have some problems with some people who thought that they had, better solutions to this kind of stuff, but aren't prepared for those, 9 inches of rain overnight. And also, a lot of the idea, the residential impact, in the sense that I think, all this DOB stuff when it comes to, renters protections and heat turning off, everybody's very slow to respond to that. I guarantee, though, that's a problem for a lot of renters in our district who are in older buildings, that they're probably having utility issues, and we're just not hearing about it because they don't think to call the community board about it. I never called you guys about it either. I'm just dealing with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should take it offline, but we can refine this.
Yeah, just food for thought.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Brian. Any other questions, comments for Rich in housing and homelessness?
An idea might be, maybe since we've got a newsletter coming up for October 1st, maybe put together some sort of survey and ask people in our district whether their buildings' basements got flooded, whether they know any buildings in the district whose basements got flooded, and sort of what sort of issues they're seeing related to that, what sort of effects they're still dealing with. That might give us a better insight into what this problem looks like here within our borders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, let's move on. So executive committee will be on Wednesday, the 20th. And then next up, we have public safety on the 21st. Matt?
Sure. So we'll cover a few different things, and we can still add a couple things if there's a need. But so I guess we're cleared to take up the council bill that Ben Kalos introduced and spoke to us about a full board last week, I guess it was, on the noise from vehicles. And I know that it's kind of crossover with some of the other committees, but it's pretty much a safety issue, which is why we have that there. And then we have possibly Brendan's still working on it, but tracking down the right city agency to kind of continue the discussion on the flooding. This would be more from the city. What did you learn a few weeks ago, and what are you going to do differently at the macro level? And then we can get into some other tidbits if needed. And lastly, I'm not sure about police precinct reports. Depends on what the issues are. I don't want to I think we should take that off as a standing item now, because I think it becomes too generic to the point where it gets tuned out by the community. And so I'd rather keep that more of a targeted item now. If there's a particular issue that the community should be paying attention to, we should probably use special language to indicate that. But we can update that as we get closer. They won't confirm their availability until a few days prior.
Maybe we could also reach out to some state agencies for the flooding. Under
Yeah.
environmental protection, they have some resiliency stuff, and then there's obviously storm recovery.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I know Brendan just circulated a note today, tracking down the city agencies, but we can certainly expand that to the state. I think there's a lot of learnings from a few weeks ago as far as public safety is concerned, and that needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, Brendan already reached out to the department, to the New York City Emergency Management, and they said that it would be better to try, at least at the city level, the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency or the Department of Environmental Protection. We haven't reached out to any state agencies yet, but we can cast the net a little wider, certainly.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of expanding it because I think the city and state, should both have some learnings and should be able to speak about that, certainly in a few weeks.
I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question for Matt. Something that's been bothering me under public safety, and I don't know how to actually articulate it, but certainly the vaccination enforcement, the violence that's been happening throughout in restaurants and other locations as they have to enforce vaccination. I thought if you had the 13th or 17th precinct, we could really hear, as opposed to the sensational stories that you hear. But I think we have an undue burden on businesses and stuff. So I didn't know, Matt, if if the police precincts are there, if that could be a subject for discussion, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, so just to backtrack, a few months ago, we did pass a resolution calling for tougher penalties committed against essential workers. And this was definitely one of the instances that came to mind. Where you have restaurant workers, now you have pretty much any business that has an indoor function is now at risk. Just for asking them, just for doing their job as far as trying to enforce vaccine mandates. So we're already on record in that regard. As far as the police precincts, I'd have to get clarity as to whether it's NYPD that's enforcing. I mean, if a crime is committed, obviously, yes, they would be the ones to respond to that. But I believe the sheriff's office has been doing a lot of the enforcement, just to make sure businesses are actually asking for vaccines and stuff like that. So that would be the sheriff's office. But if somebody gets assaulted, like we saw at Carmine's, or some of the other issues, that would obviously be a police response. So we can certainly put the question to them on that one. As to maybe even proactively provide tips to businesses, as to what to do if somebody causes a problem around that.
B, do you have a follow-up? Your hand is
No,
up.
I was
Okay.
I didn't know how to get it on the public agenda or public idea, but I think it's going to get more intense and stuff. And maybe there's some publicity to the resolution we have. I just think you've seen the tip of the iceberg on this.
All right, so let's let's add a line. We can do it in conjunction with police reports or a separate item, but we can actually list that out as discussion about enforcement of vaccine
Enforcement.
Yeah. So I think that is going to be a hot button issue as we move forward over the next few months.
Seema?
Matt, I'm just curious, do you know, you said the sheriff's office you mentioned, is it the sheriff's office or is it like a Department of Consumer and Worker Protections?
Yeah,
That's been
It goes back and forth. I think department, yeah, consumer, whatever it is, the consumer affairs might be doing like certain businesses to make sure that they're doing it, that they're actually asking people for, I mean, because enforcement's really, I think that started maybe a week and a half ago, even
Right.
though technically extended back into August. So it's relatively new. So I think the problem you're going to run into and here, there, and I think this is part of what we should be discussing at the committee is these city workers, municipal workers don't really have, a lot of authority. They can write a summons or something like that. But if they show up at a restaurant and the restaurant is not willing to cooperate with them or let them in or talk to them or tells them to get out, then what if things escalate? What is the procedure?
Right.
I think you're going to start seeing some of that where, people just have a negative attitude about the whole thing, even though it is in the interest of public health. So I think there's definitely a lot of meat to discuss there. But we can cover all angles, like who's responsible for what, who issues which fines, like, what should businesses do if things do escalate. For one reason.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, in our district, I was walking around over the weekend, and a smoothie shop had posted a sign that said, we allow everyone to come in regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender or your blah blah blah. And then like one of the things listed was your vaccination status, which I took a photo of the sign. I was really like alarmed by seeing that because they just this is something like, in my neighborhood, they had obviously just put up this sign, if I had to guess, like a week or two ago, whenever this enforcement thing happened. And they're clearly trying to say, like, we don't care about your vaccination status, which, and they couched it in all of these other things. Like if you're Black or white, if you're man or woman, if you're, whatever your sexual orientation is. And so they couched it in all these progressive terms. But I found it to be really a flagrant use of that,
Well, yeah. I mean, the difference
progressivism.
is that vaccination status isn't a protected class. The other things are.
No, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely agree with you.
No, I know.
I was really
That's
upset,
my
but
frustration
yeah.
with things like that is exactly what we're saying is like they're trying to group it in with protected class, which it's not.
Right, exactly. So I didn't know what to do. It's like,
Yeah.
who do I send that to, or who do I talk to about that, or how do I report this business? For saying that we don't care about your vaccination status, if it's effectively a restaurant, it's only smoothies, but you can sit inside.
Yeah, I mean, the law does apply if people are dining in, and I do see a lot of lax enforcement at some of these crossover businesses where it's primarily a takeout model, but they do have some tables or chairs available for people who want to consume it on site. So I think people are, they're obviously going to draw attention to themselves by posting that because anybody could take a picture of it, report it to 311 or something. But I mean, I'm not really sure. I think this 311 would direct it to the consumer agency that would handle it.
Yeah. Well, to me, this is kind of like, and we'll get more information on this too. It was kind of like the mask enforcements when we had the mask, because it was not an NYPD issue. I remember that very clearly. But it was like this mix of health and DCA and all of this other stuff. And I don't know if they've come up with a better solution, because we were or I was getting a lot of direct emails about like, here's a picture of this establishment and none of them are wearing masks, and I called the police and they said they can't do anything, so can you do something? I think part of this too is the idea of enforcement of vaccination requirements in general, but I think the kind of like second part of the conversation is like what we did see at like Carmine's is that when someone is attacked or refused the service and they act in a way that is either criminal or otherwise, but I think that's definitely a way to get to it. But yeah.
All right. So yeah, we'll have that on the committee agenda. Anybody wants to talk about it, we'll try to get clarity as to everybody's role in that matter.
Perfect. All right, let's move on. Land use and waterfront.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Matt, we'll try to get clarity as to everybody's role. Is that something you're going to take on, or do you want the office to do some research on that?
I mean, if you guys have contacts, you could ask. I mean, you could ask within the city agencies. I'll certainly ask around, within the police department, and see who's doing what, because I'm sure people are calling. I'm sure people are calling 911 periodically as things, if they're afraid of somebody. We've gotten a few instances where nothing's actually happened, but people are not willing to comply, and they're not willing to leave, so the police department gets called for those type of things. So I'll try to get clarity on my end, but if you guys have contacts, with the agencies that are supposed to be handling it, I guess we can put our hands together and figure that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, we'll move on to land use and waterfront. I don't know if you've given thought to it yet, Sandy. It was a quick turnaround, so we can keep this in progress if you would like.
Well, no, I think there are a couple things, and sorry if we'll turn down the music in the background. Definitely, I think we should talk about incorporating the strategic planning into land use, and maybe that's not. I'm not sure how we address that as an issue, but always we need the ESCR update, and also there will be a public realm improvement fund governing group meeting tomorrow, and we can report on that.
Okay.
And that's basically about 43rd and 44th Streets.
Right.
So those three things. And I don't know, is there any of the ULURPs coming up, Jesus, that might be certified by then?
It's not likely. That the only ULURP that we've really got coming down the pike is the New Providence Shelter ULURP. It's not likely to be certified by this October 25th meeting. And there was some discussion over once it is certified, it'll probably be at a November meeting of some committee, whether that should be land use, or given that it's very, very housing focused, homelessness focused, that it should be housing.
And one thing I noticed now that we've been doing more work with CB5, they quite often have these joint meetings, and they're actually run by the vice chair of the board. And it seems like a really good way to address these multiple issues that we have on some of these things. So that might be something that we think about in the future. But yes, I think we should hold a meeting, because where our last meeting was, it's been a while.
Sure. All right, this looks good. Kavitha?
Quick question, maybe not so much for Sandy as for Jesus and Kyle. We had put in for that community planning fellow or urban planning, and I thought we were going to get somebody, and I'm just wondering what capacity we see that person working in, or is it with land use, or is that still to be determined?
Well, the organization that runs that program last week emailed us saying that the fellows were chosen and that they're sort of sorting out which ones will go to which boards. I'm assuming that means that since they're sending this to us, that we will be getting one. Unfortunately, they have not been super communicative when we ask them follow-up questions. They're supposed to sometime this week give us more details about their email that they sent last week. As far as what structure or where this person will fit, they kind of have to fit in where we told them they would fit in during the project plan. So I guess you would still be the point person for that person, and I would be in there when necessary. And if the Strategic Community Planning Committee is going away, and that was part of the plan, it's been months since I've seen the plan. I'll have to refresh my memory, but then I imagine that can easily go back to, that can go to land use.
I agree. Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that was maybe happening. So to keep it on the radar.
So for agenda items, would you like us to make a more official list that we could send to you?
Well, if this is the list, we can workshop the language to make it, suitable for posting publicly. If there are other things that are going to get added, then, please send those to us. But if this is it, then we can workshop the language on this ourselves, and we'll send it to you for final approval.
It sounds good the way it is so far. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move on. I don't believe John is here, or Neil, so we'll skip youth and education. We'll figure that out offline with them. But we'll move on to business affairs and licensing.
Hello, everyone. So as always, we don't know what renewals or new applications will come in. So those will be added shortly before the meeting. Alexandra was able to coordinate a presentation from the Department of Small Business Services on the Quick Start program, which is kind of this group that helps new small businesses get their footing and, helps them with any questions that they have, and encourages growth and development. So that should be interesting. Other than that, I reached out to the nail salon workers, but hadn't heard back from them. So, whoops. That might be sorted by then, but it's not looking that great, unfortunately. And other than that, that is all we have. I do want to say that next week we are going to be talking about ghost restaurants, and I want to thank Mark for putting me in contact with Beth, who's going to be joining us there. But that could be some collaboration if Gene wants to reach out to his committee and encourage them to come to our meeting next week, because similarly to delivery workers and that kind of thing, I think there was some conversation overlap there as well. But other than that, that is all I got.
Claire, I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up. I didn't quite catch the reference to what are the restaurants you're talking about? Are these the ones that are in violation? That list of 8 restaurants in the district?
Just talking about ghost restaurants.
Okay.
In general.
Oh, it's a different thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Seema. I didn't mean to jump the line.
Seema?
Oh, all good. Yeah, so actually in this conference, Claire, I've been meaning to email you, but I was just busy with work. But at this conference I went to this morning, there was a presentation by the United Way of New York, which is which just launched something called Together We Thrive, which is about supporting Black entrepreneurs across the city and specifically around connecting them to capital and social networks and things like that. I think it'd be interesting for us to hear about what they offer and potentially, if we're open to it, having something posted on our website around supporting Black entrepreneurs in our district too. I just chatted the website for the organization that presented today, but I heard from the executive director, so I she didn't do a real nitty gritty presentation on it, but I just feel like there's something there and think we could try to support it.
That's great. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. And I agree. I think it should be something that we highlight on the website and maybe even can coordinate for next month because we still have a ways to go. So
yeah. Let me know. I can try to find a contact to, reach out to see if someone wants to present later this year or early next or whatever makes sense. But
that would be awesome. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Seema. Any other questions or comments for business affairs? All right, seeing none, that concludes the committee reports section. I do have one item of new business, which I'm postponing to next month actually instead of this meeting because we had so many reschedulings. But many of you might recall that at the August meeting, I brought up something about revisiting our bylaws to modernize them along with our open meetings law. So since we were able to discuss that, and Budget and Government Affairs will be discussing that as well, one of the things I'd like to have on our agenda for next month is a first discussion on how we need to amend our bylaws to bring them up to speed with everything that is going on. So I'll follow up by email with all of this with the specific directions, but I would like all of us to be part of that discussion. I know in the past it's been a separate committee altogether, but for the sake of creating yet another committee, let's just use executive committee to have these discussions, because I think everybody's input is really important to these discussions. So over the course of the next month, I would like everybody to review our bylaws, which are on our website. And I'll include the link to them in the email that I'll follow up with. But just take notes. I've been taking notes on these since I became chair last year. So I've accumulated some notes. I've asked for other people's notes as well. So please put together some kind of list that we can bring to discussion next month. And we'll start the conversation at that point. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up. So are there any questions or comments about that? Sandy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, actually, I was on the last group that did this, and I don't think it was a full committee, but it was really like an advisory, a special, and I forget the terminology, but we met for probably, several months to go through, and we looked at all the bylaws from all the different boards, so we had all that information, and we've been at this for 2 hours, so I really recommend that maybe we assign a few people to look at this and bring their information to this group, because it is a pretty extensive and time-consuming thing to go through. So maybe if you set up a group of people who are willing to do it, people could then send their information to them. Like, it's great that you've already reviewed this. You could send it to the group, and they could kind of highlight and put it together for review by the exec. It does still have to be voted on by full board, I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
So that's why, next. Oh, go ahead.
I just might be a way to help streamline the process.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, no. So as I mentioned, that's why it's going to be a first discussion next month. We can figure out if it makes most sense to, break out another committee. But I would like everyone on this, because we have some new perspectives, or have some more experienced perspectives on this committee. And so I'd like everyone to have that opportunity to at least bring up from their leadership roles some ideas. So let's just take the first step. Obviously, as you mentioned, this is not something that we're going to figure out next month, but it will be over the course of several months. So I'd like that initial input from everyone as well. And again, I'll follow up on this by email. Okay, are there any questions or comments on that? All right, seeing none. If any committee member has any old or new business, please raise your hand. Matt, go ahead.
So is this a new business?
Yep.
Okay. I think that one thing, and this may not be the appropriate place to raise this, but you guys can all give me your thoughts, that the city can do to help our children after school is to provide enough buses so that then they can space out on them. Because what you'll find in the 20s, which my daughter has encountered going to school down there, that you have several schools outletting at the same time and bunching up on these buses. She told me the other day, maybe a function of the UN, that she had to wait, the timing for the next bus was an hour, which to me just seems pretty outrageous, and it's an MTA issue. I think it's a transportation issue, but the one simple thing that we can do as a city for our children to help protect them during COVID is to give them more buses at dismissal so that they can space out. And that was just a thought that I had. I wanted to raise it with everybody.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that can be brought to youth and education and health and human services. So let's follow up by email on that, because that could be a good topic for health and human services, actually. All right. Any other old or new business? Please raise your hand. All right. Seeing no further business, I'm adjourning the meeting at 8:25 p.m. Thank you, everybody.